Question number 5. Who is your favourite character that you've made up? At the moment, I'd say that my favourite character is Erica, who is the female pilot in my historical novel that I've been writing since November. I keep learning more about her and more about the characters she's interacting with in the story. Just the more I write about them, it's stuff that I don't even know when I start off. I find it fascinating that when I've been writing about my characters and I then go back and do some more research on the historical figures who inspire them. For example, Erica is inspired partly by Amy Johnson, who was a female flyer back in the 20s and 30s. I just find it really interesting when I spot parallels that I didn't even know existed when I wrote them into my own character. But I spot them in the life of the person who I originally based off of. But then there's parallels, and then there's ways that they're drastically different as well. So I just find it interesting. Question number 6. When did you start writing? I suppose I must have started writing when I was really. I've seen stories that I have no memory of writing or even having the idea for writing. So I must have been very, very young. Number 7. What was the first story you wrote? I'm not sure if it was the very first story that I wrote, but I remember seeing a little booklet that I'd done with a story about dinosaurs accompanied by illustrations, and I'm sure it was very much inspired by watching The Land Before Time when I was very, very little. And I know that I definitely used to write little stories about My Little Ponies and also those little plastic kittens and puppies that you used to have. And I used to, as well as writing stories, I'd write postcards that they'd written to each other and to me. And I was very, very dedicated to filling a little book I had with all of those. And there's another one I had, which I think is probably my first sort of proper story that had a sort of plot, even if it was slightly convoluted and weird. It was about this mouse. It's about this little white mouse called April, whose best friend was a Dalmatian called Spot. And one day April and Spot get into an argument with this sort of nasty, fluffy white cat from next door, who's obviously very spoilt. And just as they seem to be winning this fight, April suddenly gets kidnapped by a mysterious man, and she's carried away in his pocket. And next thing she knows, she wakes up in a lab, in a cage, where she meets all these other animals that have been captured and are being kept there for some nefarious purpose, obviously. I remember one of the creatures she met was a little hamster called Hammy, but I can't remember any of the others now. But it turned out they were being kept somewhere in a museum by this evil pterodactyl that had woken up after however many years of being fossilised in a statue. And I remember this pterodactyl was called Lack. Yeah, and I can't remember what on earth is going to happen after that revelation. I wish I could find the notebook with that in, because I'd love to see that again. Question number 9. Do you have a writing schedule? Like, do you write every day or just when you feel like it? The thing is, I can never manage to write every day. Even when I make resolutions that I will write 1,000 words every day, I can never stick to it. Even during NaNoWriMo, where I've got little graphs and challenges to keep that should keep me writing 1,666 words every day. I can never manage to stick to it, but weirdly enough, sometimes I can just write loads and loads and loads and loads, but most of the time I write a lot less than I'd like to. But it's just no use for me saying I will write such and such amount every single day. Question number 10. Do you want to be published? I suppose it's quite a sort of difficult one because I know how difficult it is to be properly published these days, and I already publish in a way because I put my stories out there for people to look at and read, and I do stories as challenges for communities on live journals and stuff like that. But it's for a small group of people who generally like my stuff. So I suppose if I do get to the point where I'd want to put something out, you know, if I finished a novel or a novella and I'm happy with it, then I'd probably self-publish it and just sort of get it out there that way, rather than waste my time trying to find a traditional publisher and just getting knocked back the whole time. I mean, one thing I definitely could do is publish what I've got of my poems. Like, my mum has been sort of saying that I should get my poems printed up in a little book. She says she's got friends who do printing, so I think perhaps I should do that sooner rather than later, and just sort of at least have something that I can hold in my hand and say that's mine. You know, that's a little book of my stuff, of my poems, and possibly a few of my short stories as well. But it's probably gonna it's probably worth it, really, isn't it? So yeah, so I think at some point soon I'll publish something for myself and maybe for my old teachers or something, just in that very, very small way.